What are some of the common ways execs fail and how to avoid those? Obviously, this is a very generalized question, but let's throw out a couple of ways in which I've seen them fail. One is the classic Peter principle. They're in over their head. This is probably the most common thing, which is they were very successful at one role or one level. So let's see what they can do with the next. And it's just not going to work out. Obviously, there's a bunch of different ways in which you could correct this or you can avoid those. But if they're in the role, it's really just taking them out of the role. In all likelihood, if they're not doing well over some decent amount of time, they're not likely to do it well. Maybe they need more time and seat at a lower level. Maybe they need a different organization. But if it's not working, just remove them. Another way in which I think execs fail is they tend to want to do the next job. So as an example, maybe they were promoted to COO, but they really want to be CEO. They're thinking ahead to doing the next job. Simplest way to correct this one is to very pointedly remind them that they'll never get to that job if they're not successful in this one. Most people will adapt pretty quickly because they realize they're actually sabotaging themselves, but they won't if they're not called out on this. So call them out, make it explicit. Tell them you're there to help them. Tell them you want to see them be successful, but they'll never get what they want if they're not successful in that role. Another common pattern that I do see with execs is the right person, wrong place. This person is probably very good, but in a more specific situational context. So maybe they actually are a VP of engineering at a 5-person company or a 10-person company, but not a 100-person company. Or maybe they are an SVP of engineering at a 10,000-person company, but there's no ability for them to be the CTO at a 200-person company. This is just a mismatch. The classic, hey, they look great on paper because we thought we were hiring for something. We totally borked the idea of what the match for the role was. And this goes back to my don't hire people from big tech in many scenarios. For smaller size companies, there's going to be this weird mismatch. It's not universal, but it happens so often that it has to become a meme. I have about 6 months of runway left and looking at the next round. I'm being offered preference or a lower valuation, and I don't know what to do. All right, I'm gonna get pretty pointed here. So for those that don't know what preference is, just think of it as an investor saying, hey, we want to invest in the business, but we need to take some preference into what this looks like. The most common way to say this is there's liquidation preferences. There's a whole bunch of different ones, but just think about this at the moment as liquidation preferences, meaning they might put a number in front of their investment. They have a 1x, a 2x, or a 3x liquidation preference. So imagine this scenario. An investor invests $10 million into a business with a 1x liquidation preference. No matter what the outcome of that business, as long as it's above $10 million, they want to get paid back that $10 million. So it doesn't matter who else has equity in the business or if the founders own 80%, but if they have a 1x liquidation preference, they want that $10 million back. So what's happening right now to people who raised money in 2020 and 2021 is the valuations that they were previously raised at are so incredibly out of whack with the market that there's a couple of different mechanisms that come into play to correct that. One is to keep the same valuation. Maybe you're not doing a down round, but you're keeping the same valuation, but you're giving the new investor preference. And the other is, in a typical scenario, you're going to take a lower valuation. As an investor and advising founders, I never find preference to work out in the founder's favor. It never does the company or the founders any service to do that. The only reason I see that people take preference is for ego reasons. They don't want to take a down round. They want to keep this at least the same valuation to save face. In my opinion, this is a massive mistake. It's a short-term view and a long-term game. It's always much better to reset the valuation, particularly because you're going to have to hire people and you're probably going to have to adjust your 409A anyway. And let's go back and look at recent history about one of the most famous down round examples and how it worked out. And it was Facebook's pre-IPO round. Facebook took a down round in an adjusted market and it worked out just fine. But imagine what would happen if they had 2 or 3x liquidation preferences on those scenarios. So don't let your ego get in the way. Think about what's best for the founders and the employees and the business long term. Typically speaking, I don't think it's ever preference.